If you drive past horses and don't say horses, you're a psychopath. If you see an airplane but don't point it out, a rainbow, a cardinal, a butterfly. If you don't whisper, shout, albino squirrel, deer, red fox. If you hear a woodpecker and don't shush everyone around you into silence. If you find an unbroken sand dollar in a tide pool. If you see a dorsal fin breaking the water. If you see the moon and don't say, oh my God, look at the moon. If you smell smoke and don't search for fire. If you feel yourself receding, and don't tell anyone until you're gone.
That was a poem beginning with a retweet by Maggie Smith, read by Carrie Rudzinski, and she is on here with Olivia Hall today, and this is Poetry Snaps. I'm Sarah Krieg. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks. It's so good to have you both on.
Thank you.
Why'd you choose that poem, Carrie?
I chose that poem actually because it reminds me of this moment when I was on tour with Olivia Hall. Was it in 2019, you think? Or earlier?
I don't know. I don't know what the moment is.
Okay, sorry. I thought you could read my mind. So Liv and I have been touring around the country since about 2016 at various times. And at one point we were driving from Dunedin to Christchurch. And I think Liv was driving, and she's done that drive like a million times because she used to live down there. And I am the kind of person who's plastered up against the window going, oh my God, the mountains. Oh my God, the ocean.
You do that. Oh my God,
the trees.
The time.
Yeah. And so it just made me, I love that poem. I think it like speaks to me on a human level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me.
But it also reminded me of this magical moment where Liv was like, what are you doing?
This is the most boring drive in New Zealand.
Yes. She was like, this drive is terrible. And I was like, a tree. And it was great. Yeah.
It's green.
Yes. That's me all the time in New Zealand.
Yes.
But in New Zealand, do you feel like you're like that in the States as well?
No.
Do you feel like you're like that when you are in London, Liv?
I don't know. I just...
Are you like,
controversial opinion? Controversial opinion. I don't care for nature. I am simply not a nature person. Give me a skyscraper.
A point of difference between us.
And me and the rest of the world. That's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll build you a city.
Thank you. I would like it to have big parks, but that's it.
You're like, ooh, a park.
Yes.
Ooh,
a cherry blossom and a squirrel for sure.
Yes, great.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it for me.
I love that. I guess the most basic question is, how do you two know each other?
Oh, it's our favorite thing to talk about.
Yeah, you tell it.
Okay, so 2016.
I don't know. Well, we met at some point in 2015.
I know we met in 2015 at some stage, but in 2016 we had our like proper meet cute.
Yeah.
When,
that's a good way of describing it.
Yeah, when Carrie came to Wellington to be a feature poet at a Poetry in Motion event, and I was one of the organisers of PIM at the time. And I already knew Carrie's poetry because Carrie's famous.
It's not true.
And so I thought she was cool, and I wanted her to think that I was cool. So I was very nervous. I was like, I have to do my best poem. I have to make this woman like me.
It worked.
And it worked very well.
Yeah.
And we spoke briefly at the event, I assume.
Yes, I remember
Long
you walking
enough
up. Yeah.
for me to be like, do you want to come to my house for tea tomorrow? A thing I have never asked anyone to do. I would say I asked you out more than I have ever asked any person out. Basically.
Sorry, Alec.
Yeah, because I was just like, come to my house.
Well, I think we were like aware of each other, and we'd kind of like vaguely been at poetry events very early when I'd moved here. And so I was like vaguely aware of Liv, but that was like, I think our first meeting. So I went over to her house and like, swear to God, like was like, do you want to do a poetry show together?
She asked me that day.
Yeah, because I was like, I need a friend, first of all.
We did click very, very quickly.
Instantly.
Yeah.
I felt instantly comfortable in a way that like I really was desiring for months. In New Zealand, I'd left all these like really, really important female friendships back in the States who are still important to me and I still nurture. But like I was looking for that desperately here, and you were the first person that like clicked for me. And I was like, yes. let's
Yes.
make it happen. So we thought we were going to do one show in Wellington.
I agreed to do a single Wellington show with
7
this
years
woman.
ago.
Is what I agreed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, we loved it.
What was that show?
It was the earliest iteration of How We Survive. So we called it How We Survive. That's when we first came up with that
Yes,
name.
to be clear, I wanted to call it like cunt knives or something, and Liv was like, "Absolutely not. We're going to call it something
So
sweet
Carrie
and
says,
beautiful."
you say I came up with How We Survive,
You
but I
did.
don't remember doing that
yeah,
at all.
Yeah, and you also came up with the name for Hysterical, our new show. So she's the
so
genius.
it was like the earliest iteration of that. I think we wrote 2 group poems for it.
We technically wrote 3 because the event got taken down on
yeah.
Facebook by these men activists.
Whoa, what?
Yeah. Part of the reason that we're here is because the very first show we did got a whole lot of buzz because a whole lot of men's rights activists reported the event for being a feminist event on Facebook and said
Yeah.
it was hate speech, and it got taken down after hundreds of people had said they were interested.
And it only made us stronger.
And then we got media attention because it had been taken down.
Yeah.
And when we put it up again, it genuinely got over 1,000 people
Yeah.
saying they were interested in the event.
Yeah.
And we were doing a one-off show in a 80-seat
Yeah, if that.
bar, if
yeah.
that. We crammed people in.
We added a second show that weekend because
We put my partner on the door and he had to turn people away at the door because we had crammed every person we could into Cabin Club in Wellington.
yeah. So we wrote a poem about Hermione Granger for that show. We wrote a poem about Brock Turner, the Stanford rapist. And then we also kind of wrote this random like last minute
Yes.
poem dedicated to those men who tried to take down our Facebook
Yes,
event, which
that's
was
true.
great. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Were those? Do you know whether those men who tried to take down the event were they from New Zealand or like?
No
how do you-
idea.
They were kind of like very juvenile.
Yeah,
in their posts.
people had been posting on the page with just like
Make me a sandwich.
yeah, bog standard kitchen jokes and things like that.
yeah.
But then I think we knew, like we got a message from Facebook saying your event's been taken down because it's considered to be hate speech, basically. So it was
Yeah.
very clear what
Yeah, what
was
had
happening.
happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Far out.
Thanks to those guys.
Yeah.
They've made us stronger, better.
Yeah, they really.
They
really-
powered us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, How We Survived, that was, what year was that, sorry?
So that very first show was in 2016.
Yeah, so we kind of did we did some smaller shows and touring, mostly in Wellington and Auckland in 2016 and then 2017. And we went to a couple different places in 2017. And
Just
it
before I
wasn't
moved overseas.
Yeah, and it wasn't a theater show at that stage. It was genuinely a reading in a bar, and we just kind of like had a couple 2 or 3 group pieces together, and we mostly just did random solo stuff. And we would often like pick the set like minutes before we were going on stage. Like it wasn't a structured,
No,
curated event.
it was
kind
a
of
reading,
thing.
very much so.
Yeah, it was a reading, and then Liv moved.
2019, yeah, and then I moved. So then I moved overseas in 2017, and so 2019 was our first proper national tour.
with a proper
With a
show
theatre show.
in theaters. That could be-
Mostly by then we were in theaters.
Yeah.
And we had written a lot more group material.
Yeah,
And so
that
it came together much more like a show. And so that was the sort of finalized version of How We Survive.
yeah,
And that's when we did the book as well.
yeah.
And how is Hysterical, which is the latest show, how is that connected to How We Survive? Because, I mean, I imagine that there are like some quite similar themes and...
I think there are similar themes, but I think, and there's connections just in that, like, we wrote both shows and that there are things that we wanted to speak about and expand on and respond to even. Harry Potter was a huge part of the first show in 2019. And specifically focused on Hermione Granger as a feminist role model for us. And we knew that we wanted to address J.K. Rowling's transphobia and just like what a nightmare she is in this show and kind of call back. So there are definitely callbacks for people who have seen both shows. And it's been really amazing to have.
For the true fans.
Yeah, for the true fans.
That's what I want. I want us to be the
Yeah.
Taylor Swifts of poetry. I want
do
us like
too.
dropping Easter eggs in our shows.
There
for our
are
next
Easter
shows.
eggs.
That's actually my dream,
Because like
to be honest.
in How We Survive, for such our favorite, I don't want to speak for you, but one of our favorite poems was our Brock Turner.
Oh, 100%.
Right?
You can speak for me.
Okay, thank you. it's called Brock Turner's Father Also Has a Daughter. And it was just a really heavy-hitting banger of a slam poem.
It's the first banger we wrote together.
And I love that poem, right? And
Me too.
it was kind of iconic, I think, in the show. Lots of people spoke to us about it. And in our new book for Hysterical, the very first quote that opens the book is by Chanel Miller, who was Brock Turner's victim. So
That does feel like an Easter egg.
yeah, it's an Easter egg, right? So like there are things that are just woven together. There are things that we're responding to. There's things that to us felt really important.
But then we're very different. And I think we talk about this a lot, and we spoke about it a lot when we were writing Hysterical, that we're really different people now from when we wrote How We Survive.
Yeah.
And also with How We Survive, it wasn't just that we wrote material then. We were using poems that both of us had written in the years prior. So some of that material, was older even then. Whereas this time around, everything that is in Hysterical, we wrote within the last year, specifically for Hysterical. And so I think it encapsulates really well who we are and where we're at now as people that, like everyone else, have been living through a global pandemic.
Yeah.
And all of that jazz. So
I mean,
yeah.
How do you think you have changed, like potentially personally, but also like as poets and performers, since How We Survive?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've grown, and I think we wanted to push ourselves a lot with Hysterical in terms of the writing and the performing and how much it felt like a theatre show, I think. Because I think poetry as theatre is awesome. And I love the things that you can do with that. And so we had a lot of conversations about that. And I think basically, like Carrie said, also thinking about what we'd said and How We Survive. Because it's not like How We Survive is a show that's been seen by thousands and thousands of people, but it has been seen by people who we knew would probably come to the next show. And it felt important to reflect on where our views on things had developed or things that had happened in the world that meant we wanted to address them in a particular way.
I think How We Survive focused, we were at a different place with our feminism, I think, and it focused on, whether intentionally or unintentionally, it focused on differences between specifically men and women at the time. And I think whether we intended to, sometimes I think men sometimes felt like, oh, I can't come to this. It's this feminist thing. I'm going to be shamed during this kind of 2 hours or whatever, hour and a half. And in Hysterical, I think that we've grown as feminists as well as poets and performers. And we're looking at the systematic problems that are happening, and we're not pointing our fingers at a group of people and saying, you've messed up. We're saying, what can we collectively do? And ideally, like calling people and men into the conversation instead of making them feel ostracized in the conversation for stuff. I feel like we've unpacked that a lot in the writing of the show.
And I think we spoke much more openly about not wanting to reinforce binaries and things like that in this show.
Yes.
And spoke the gift of being given funding to write a show and being able to write everything specifically for this show meant that we got to think about the narrative and what we wanted to say really, really clearly. And so I think also having a lot of conversations about who we are and where we sit in terms of our identities and our life experiences, and figuring out, really wanting to walk the line appropriately in terms of knowing what the show can do and what it can encompass, and also being aware of and knowing what the show can't do because of who we are, which is, it can't speak for all women. And, figuring out the best way to do that in a way that would make lots of people feel included and feel like they could see bits of themselves in the show without co-opting experiences in any way that aren't ours.
Yeah, that's quite the evolution.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've also just have been through a lot, both of us personally, in the last few years, and so that obviously comes into it too, just in terms of what it is that we want to write about and things like that.
Yeah.
Something that I thought about while I was preparing for this was that obviously, I feel like obviously just because of the title of the show, in Hysterical, you talk a lot about crying, and also the connection between crying being perceived as something feminine and also being perceived as something weak. And something I'm interested in is to what extent you think that being able to emote is necessary for being able to write poetry, write and perform, be a poet as well. Because I feel like there's probably in a lot of people's minds like quite a close connection between being emotionally vulnerable and writing poetry. But I think, I don't know. I just thought that there might be a connection between like is it possible to not be able to be emotionally vulnerable and like still really be able to, I don't know, tap into your poetic potential? That sounds cheesy,
I mean,
but
sure you could, but don't know that it's going to be good. No, I think there's also this element of like, what's the kind of poetry that I like to read and what's the kind of poetry that I connect to? And obviously, like so much art, I think poetry is a lot of it can feel really subjective, right? There's going to be poems that I read in books and I'm like, oh gosh, like really? This is the piece that felt like it smashed it for you. But I think that that's part of why I love performance poetry and why I love the experience of live art is seeing somebody experience emotion, and even somebody who doesn't feel like they're going to get up and emotionally connect to their piece. When you put it in front of an audience and you're feeling that buzz and you're feeling that vulnerability and you have to actually say those words out loud, something shifts, right? Something breaks. And so I think that that's part of why we both write the way that we do and what we write about, and then bringing it in front of a live audience just makes that all come together. But of course, somebody who's not super emotional can write a poem, but I think that it's the kind of poetry that I connect to, I think, is one that feels, it taps into a vulnerability, I guess, and an honesty. I think I'm always looking for something real in what I am experiencing. Even if that's in fiction, there's still truth and, you know?
I think everything I do in my life is better when I am emotionally connected to what I'm doing. And I think that's true for me in my work, in what I've chosen to study, and where my academic background is now. It's true in my relationships, it's true in my writing, and it's true in performing for me. And Carrie and I have talked a lot more on this tour, I think, just because it comes up a lot, about how we came to performance poetry from different sides, and Carrie came to it more from a writing side and I came to it more from a performing side. And so I think that's always been really true for me. That's, you know, theatre and acting and performing was such a big part of my life growing up. But I know that it's always been really important to me to find some sort of emotional way into anything that I'm doing, even if it's not something that I've written. And so that just feels doubly important when it's work that I'm writing and then sharing.
Yeah. Interesting that you talk about the two different routes that you took to poetry. I'm curious whether you both consider yourselves poets in the first instance. Like if somebody asks you, like, what's your jam? Would you say that you're a poet?
Yeah.
Carrie, you say yes?
It's taken me a really long time to get there. I felt like a real fraud calling myself a poet for a really, really, really long time.
But you're so good.
When we flew back into New Zealand and I had to like write down my occupation on my form to enter the country, I was coming back knowing that I was coming back to be a poet full time for a while and to do the tour and things. And I just remember sitting there being like, I'm going to have to write poet here. And I really didn't want to. I like really wanted to tap out and just put writer or like something else. And my partner was like, just, you are literally here to be a poet. Like, write it. So I did. And I think that feels big for me. I think that word has a lot of meaning to me and is something that I value a lot. And because I felt like I came to it from the performance side for so long, it felt illegitimate to me for a long time to use it. But now I would. I just saw a million lawyers last night and every one of them asked me what I did and I said poet. So that felt good.
Great.
Yeah.
The number of barbecues I've been at where an accountant is like, so poetry, what's a poetry slam? And I'm like, fucking kill me right now. Like, just smother me in barbecue, put me on the barbecue. Like, I'm done. Can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I love that though, because I mean, like, that's part of the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is to sort of like answer some of those questions. Like when people are like, poet, like what do poets do? It's like this.
Yes.
I think my sister said to me very early on when I graduated college, and I didn't study poetry, but I went, when I finished college and I was waitressing, she was like, you are a poet who waitresses in her free time. You are not a waitress who does poetry in her free time. And I've always thought about that. That was a really 15 years ago kind of thing.
Moment, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always stuck with me that, and I've always felt that, like even right now I have a full-time job that is not involved in a creative sphere at all, but I am a poet first, and that is just my backup gig, even though it's what's paying my bills at the, in some ways. This is also paying my bills right now. But yeah, I think I've always, since my sister said that to me, always thought of myself first as a poet.
Was it, Liv, was it for you the moment of like, I'm coming back into the country to do poetry that made you give yourself that?
I think so. I think it's funny language. It's funny. Yeah, it's just funny the way I think about language and what we use. I've shied away from ages for ages from calling myself an educator in any way as well, even though I do lots of work in that sphere. And I've just taken another job in that sphere. And so I've started to be like, I have to add educator now. I have to say poet and educator. And I just think my background, because my academic background is in gender, and that already comes with all of that same stigma, I think, that you'd get if you said that you were a poet in a particular room, saying that you're a gender major is going to have some of the same impact. And I faced a lot of, what are you going to do with that? And so I think I've always just been really nervous about using language that I didn't feel like I'd be able to back up properly. You're scared that you'll be like, I'm a poet. And they'll be like, right, well, where can I read your stuff? Who's published you? And things like that. So I think I was, scared about that. And getting funding for the show made a really big difference to that. Being like, these people think that we've done good work and deserve to be funded as artists.
Twice.
Multiple times over. Really helped with that. So it was definitely knowing when I left my job in London that I was giving myself space to just do this, but also whatever else sort of called to me in a creative sense for a little bit of time, made me be like, that's the gig. There's nothing else. I actually don't have another job to hide behind in the same way. And so that's actually kind of been useful.
Can I ask what other kind of work you've done outside of poetry?
Yeah, totally. I actually worked for a tech startup for a long time while I was living overseas, which I got into through debating. I was a competitive university debater.
You are very competitive.
Yes. And so I worked for this tech startup, and I was with it for a really long time as it grew, and it gave me the ability to live in New York where my partner was studying there, and the ability to fund my master's when I moved to London. So that was a really good gig for the time in my life that I was at. And then the plan was to leave that after I'd finished my master's, and I really wanted to work with in organisations. Particularly, I'm very invested in sexual violence prevention, so that was the sphere I really wanted to go into. And then there was a pandemic, and moving from my nice corporate job to a NGO or a charity did not feel doable, while also being able to afford living in London. So I was a volunteer with Rape Crisis in London, and that was sort of how I kept that side of my life going. And I finished that job at that startup when I left London, just a couple of months before I left London. And now that's still very much the sphere that I sort of want to get into alongside my creative work. And so I'm just about to start teaching a program in schools about healthy relationships and consent. So
great.
That will be
not
the other educating
spreading the
that I get to do.
Not directly poetry related, but I want to hear more about that program. What is it called?
It's called the Mates and Dates program. It's an ACC program,
great.
Which they fund in high schools around the country. And so I'm going to get to do it in a bunch of Auckland schools, which will be awesome. And it's, really, really nice. And it's realistically a job that I get to do because I have experience teaching poetry now in schools. And so I got to line up the fact that I have some classroom experience with the fact that I have a lot of gender-based knowledge and, combine those two, which I'm genuinely very, very excited about.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent opportunity.
Yeah.
So I'm going to pivot slightly to talk about your sort of involvement in both of your involvement in poetry, like scenes, bunny ears around scenes. Because Carrie, you've been part of the Auckland poetry scene.
I believe you once called me the mother of the
I was going to say, I believe you are
poetry
the Auckland poetry scene.
No, I'm not. It's very, it's a lot of responsibility. I don't want any children, so.
Look, we're all aunties in some way.
Yeah. Always a godmother, never a god.
Ooh. I guess, because there'll be people listening who don't know much about the I guess like the Auckland poetry scene and like what your experience of poetry in Auckland is like. Can you talk a little bit like to that? What kind of like spaces you're part of specifically? Yeah.
Well, I think there's like a plethora of poetry and open mics in Auckland. So I can only speak to my experience, and props to everybody who's started events and kept events going, because it's effing hard.
Yeah. Shout out.
Yeah. As one of the co-founders of the Jaffa Poetry Slam, that's been running since literally since I landed in the country in 2015. And
you wrote on your arrival sheet, you wrote Jaffa poet.
Jaffa poet. It's just I've done that work for free for many, many years, and Jaffa just got their first official big CNZ funding, which is really thrilling to have a bit of money behind us.
Well done, CNZ.
Yeah, well done. And so, I think that Auckland, specifically in the slam scene, which is the competitive form of performance poetry, Jaffa sends the Auckland representatives to the National Poetry Slam. So we've had several national champions come out of our scene, which is really awesome. And I think there is a really there's a really strong friendship and family vibe at our events, that people are supporting one another and excited to see one another, and that there's a real buzz and creativity. I love it and I feed off of it, and I think there's a real pulse there of people coming together to not only compete but to share words and to have fun. And we do a lot of fun events like Super Duper Boom Boom Fight Night Slam, which is actually going to come up next month, which is our team slam. And we just try to do some fun stuff as well as sending our representatives to the national scene. So it's a fun time. It can be competitive, but we also, I think, Ken and I, who co-founded Jaffa, we wanted to bring this element that in New Zealand, there were a lot of big cash prize slams before we arrived here, and people were only slamming one time a year for $1,000. And that just seemed insane. That's just not, it should be we were coming from spaces where we were slamming every week for $10, you know? And it was just a thing you did because you loved it. And so we wanted to take some of the pressure off of slamming by doing it more frequently for less money, for just a vibe, you know? So I don't know, maybe we've destroyed things, but that was our intention. So, and hopefully Olivia Hall is going to slam if I can convince her this year.
We'll see.
Why do you think you've destroyed things?
I just I don't know if those big cash prizes still exist, but I mean, it's not about the money. It's about the poetry.
The point is not the dollars.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, I saw you perform Liv the other day at
my
the
very
open
first
mic.
Jaffa.
It was the very first Jaffa event.
Which is wild. It's been part of my life for as long as you've been as part of my life.
Yeah.
I've just never been in Auckland when it's been on.
Yeah. Were you part of Motif poetry scenes down in Wellington? Or?
No, Motif wasn't in Wellington when I lived in Wellington. So when I first got into poetry, when I lived in Wellington, which was in 2013, Poetry in Motion was very much the big event in Wellington every month. And that's where I first slammed. That's where I first found a poetry community who were very, very welcoming and who I loved. And so I worked as part of the PIM team and was one of the organisers for the time that I lived there. I went to Dunedin somewhere in the middle there for a year and a half, and then when I came back I was still part of PIM for a couple of years while I lived in Wellington again. And so when I moved overseas in 2017, Ben and Sarah of Motif were also still overseas at that stage. So it was before they'd come back and set it up. So yeah, PIM was really my New Zealand poetry community.
Right.
Yeah.
What differences do you notice between the Wellington poetry scene that you experienced, I guess, like shifts and changes since then, and what you perceive in Auckland?
I think it's about the specific years that I was there as well, not even necessarily about the overall scene, because I haven't been part of the Wellington scene now for 5 years. There were a lot of men. There were a lot of men that were very, very good and very, very great when I was there, but it didn't feel like there were a lot of women.
There was a lot of pun poetry.
Yeah, there was a lot of, Wellington was going through a phase of very comedic poetry on the whole. And that was what they loved, and that was the vibe, and that was great because we had poets who are really, really good at that, poets that I love and really respect. But it meant that at times I probably felt a little bit isolated. Like I didn't have people like Carrie who I felt like were writing the same sort of poetry as me. And so I didn't really feel like I had people that could be mentors or things like that. I really just felt like this kid that had showed up and was going to do whatever I could because that was my jam. But
You smashed it, but you were kind of like odd woman out a bit.
yeah, and that was how it felt a little bit. But I had really great friends and they were all awesome. I just knew that, it wasn't quite the same. But I was a little bit scared of the Auckland scene at that stage.
Auckland scene's always been really political, at least like since I've been involved in it. I feel like it's always been, slammy and political, and it's and digging into identity and things like that.
And I think because you are, and I see it now, like I loved being at Jaffa, and the vibe was so good. But I think if you're outside of that and you do feel a little bit isolated in your community, or like you're just in a place that's sort of figuring itself out, and we were sort of doing that in Wellington, I think you look at that and it's easy to be a little bit envious of how big and hype you up the Auckland team is of each other. And I think I felt like obviously they benefited from you and Ken coming and creating something that looked more similar probably to what exists in the US, which is my experience of poetry in the US.
Yeah.
That you have a venue that you're really attached to.
Yes.
You have a family and a community at that venue, and they totally go to bat for each other. They totally hype each other up. And I think that's such a cool space and community that you've created at Jaffa. But I reckon that because that doesn't exist in the same way in other parts of the country, it can be really easy to look at that and be like, oh, that feels like I can't be part of that. And it's sad.
That's a really good read, because in the States, they used to, it's stopped now, but the National Poetry Slam ran for so long, and so different venues, different cities would send teams to compete against one another, but they would also be multiple teams from the same city. Because
it's based on
venues.
venue rather than city. So you really are attached to like a home venue. And that was my experience when I got to New York. It was like, choose a venue. Like that's it.
Yeah, and that's your home.
And that's your home, exactly.
And you, like, ride or die.
But I love that. And I think that is what Jaffa is in Auckland, which I think is so cool. And I would love for it to be possible for that to exist more so elsewhere, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you talk about the venue, because like Cityside Baptist, well, I love them. Stu, his name's Stu, right?
Stu McGregor, yep.
Yeah, he's crack up. Loved his poem on the open mic the other night.
Yeah, he's great, yeah.
But I sometimes wonder if there are some people who see the venue and are concerned purely by the fact that it is a church, because they might not know much about the kaupapa of the space. And yeah, I just wonder like what your sort of like take on that response to that is, like what you wish people could know about the venue.
Yeah, we've had a lot of different venues over the years. We even ran stuff down at MIT and Otara for a few months when we first started, and then we were at Merge Cafe on K Road for a long time. They were really awesome. We even ended up at the Peace Place, which is like a little tiny, almost like conference room with like many different religions represented inside of it. We were just like, we need a cheap ass venue, and then we ended up at Cityside because different friends of ours had used it as a performance space, and we're like, hey, this is kind of a cool space. So yeah, it's a bit like reclaiming the space. I think every time we go in I forget that we are in a church every time I'm in there. And yeah, I think it's just like the crew comes in and we just kind of, it's about poetry. It's about sharing space. It's about kind of having a relaxed environment at the moment. And we might move into more theater spaces or other spaces going forward. We're not like necessarily attached to staying at Cityside, but it's been a good home for us. And especially during our pandemic years, I think, of this non-pressure, there's, bean bags and pillows and yeah, like just kind of come and sing around them, sit and vibe together around the mic,
And I think, I definitely forget that I'm in a church when I'm in there. Also, just because like none of the poetry is censored.
No, it's not censored. We don't tolerate hate speech, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think also even by charging money, you're cutting out some of those people that would come and maybe, like if they're going to come and disrupt, like they had to pay to come in to do that, and I have no problem taking them out if they wanted to, but I've sat through so much bad poetry, and not like, I'm not even saying that in a rude way, like just like misogynistic, sexist, racist, like homophobic. I've sat through all of that stuff in spaces, and there's just no tolerance for it in Jaffa. Like we just that's not the space that we're trying to create. And so it's uncensored. You can say what you want, but if you're going to be cruel, we're going to ask you to leave. So
I don't think I've ever in my time being part of Jaffa, I don't think I've ever heard a poem where I've felt that someone was being attacked or bullied or directly hated on.
No, and I would send Jessica Fenton up to that person and ask her with her head girl energy to remove that person.
Remove that person.
She's my bodyguard.
And
she would 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did you, Liv, did you feel that when you were in the space, did you forget you were in a church?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And I think that just comes from, like, I grew up through speech competitions and debating, and like I've been doing like some form of uncensored performing or competing in random spaces because that's just how those things go. Like I've debated in churches. We hold massive debates in big churches around the country all the time when we were at university, and they were, equally uncensored and often talking about subjects that were wild to have in a church. So, I don't think it, bothers me that much. But I think, definitely Cityside is a particular example of where you forget it pretty much instantly.
Yeah.
Did you perform when you were in London?
Yeah.
What kind of spaces were you in there?
I didn't get to perform nearly as much as I would have liked because almost 3.5 years I was there, 2 of them I was in some form of lockdown. Functionally.
Yeah.
But you need to brag right now because you've won things.
But I did the thing that I think I learned from the UK, which is like I found my home venue. I went to a few different places in London, but I fell in love with a particular place called Genesis.
Shout out Genesis.
Shout out Genesis, which actually was run by Ben and Sarah of Motif when they lived in the UK. So that's great. We basically crossed in the sky and they came to New Zealand and I just like moved into Genesis, which was held amazingly in this very cool like movie theatre in the UK in London.
Love that.
Which just like upstairs had this big open space with a bar and the cinemas were downstairs. And so they just gave it to Genesis once a month to host there, which was wicked. Tickets were free. You paid like a $1 or $2 booking fee to go to Genesis. Otherwise it was great.
Did you find that there were ever any people who took advantage of the easy access to?
Not in my experience. Again, Genesis, I think, sets itself up culturally the same way as Jaffa.
Yeah.
Their slams, for example, so they do a slam every month during the sort of competitive season. Their slams are set up so that there are spaces held for men, held for women, and held for non-binary and trans performers. And
Interesting.
So the slam is sort of split up that way because it would be really popular to jump in and grab slam spots. So they do that to try and ensure diversity of voices on the mic at every event, which is really cool. And yeah, I just think culturally it was set up in such a way that you would be booed off the stage if you were causing problems.
Did you happen to win something there or go to a national final at some point?
Yes, I was the 2019 Genesis Slam champ, which was my dream. They gave me a crown, which actually does make it the best slam I've ever won.
That's great.
Honestly.
Jeff a crown?
Yeah, let's make one.
Let's get
tiara.
Oh my gosh, 100%. I'll show you mine. I obviously have kept mine.
Obviously.
Genuinely.
Why don't you wear it during hysterical?
I will. There's actually a hilarious video because after I won, they made me read like an encore poem, but they made me read it with the crown on my head.
yes.
Filmed it, put it on YouTube. I look like a
poem is it?
wild person. I read Love Poem for Alec because it was a random encore poem. But yeah, I am very competitive, and genuinely that day when they posted on Twitter being like, we've bought a crown for whoever wins, I was like,
I've got to win now.
I didn't, I was feeling okay about it. Now I actually must have that red Diamante ruby crown.
Yes.
So it was great. And yeah, it meant that I got to go to the UK national final, which was rad.
Great.
Mohammed Hassan was also in that national final. So
Shout out.
we love to have some New Zealand representation
Yeah.
in the UK slam scene.
Love it. And how did you said that you said that you came from a performance background. You said that you were doing debating at uni. What was like your first slam? Did you do any like slam poetry at high school or like?
No, but when I was in my last year of high school, I got taken by my English teacher, my whole writing class did, to an event at Auckland Writers Festival that Sonia Renee Taylor performed at. So that was the first time I'd ever seen performance poetry. And because she writes so much about her body and about living in a fat body, that it spoke to me very immediately and very intensely. And so I sort of like tucked that away in my back pocket. I was like, that's very cool. But that's the only experience I've had of it. As far as I was concerned, it didn't exist in New Zealand. And then I totted off to university and was really, really focused on debating for a few years. And then did, I think, the classic thing, which is watch 100 videos on YouTube of US performance poets. Yeah, exactly. And was like, oh, this is really cool. And also I'm a person that likes performing, and I'm a naturally competitive person. And I was coming to the end of my university debating career, and I was like, surely I need some other form of competition. So I looked it up, saw that Poetry in Motion existed in Wellington. I told no one that I was going. I was like, this could go terribly, and then I don't want anyone to know that it's happened. So my partner, who's my current partner, at the time we were in a long distance relationship, so I told him that I was going, and he was the only person that knew, and I just rocked along to this slam and was like, I'm not even going to do an open mic first because I'll psych myself out. I'm just going to enter this slam and see what happens.
And what happened?
I came second to Mark Raffles.
Mark Raffles, are you joking?
No.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Mark won that slam and I came second, and so we both qualified for the Wellington regional final.
This is my dream
story. Yeah. And I met Travis, and I fell head over heels in love with that space.
Because hilariously, Ken and I were the very first features at Poetry in Motion. Like there had never been one, and Ali Jax like put this event on, and so I met Travis and Mark and Ali all at that event as well. So yeah, our lives are intertwined.
They are. I love it.
I love that.
Yeah,
it's adorable. Carrie, we've spoken a little bit before about how you got into poetry. We spoke about it on
Third Wheel.
Yeah. If you want to access that, it's on all your podcasting apps. But can you tell me a little bit about your first ever slam? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I might have actually slammed in like London for one of the first times. I was studying abroad there, but I'd been a poet and reading at this open mic, my home venue in Boston, for a long time, but I'd not started.
But you've not slammed?
I didn't slam for years.
What?
Yeah. It was a very.
I did not know this about you.
Yeah, from like 2005 to like 2007, I didn't.
You were just reading on open mics and not slamming?
Yeah. It was a thing.
Inconceivable
I was
to me.
18 years old.
Inconceivable to me.
And I got broken up with in 2007, and it was a huge breakup in my life. And I wrote my first ever banger of a slam poem.
That'll do it.
Elbows.
Yes. The last line of which literally destroyed me the first time I heard it.
I think it had that effect on
fucked me
a lot
up.
of people. Yeah, that breakup really fucked me up. So,
But it gave you the first banger.
yeah, I might have slammed like occasionally before that, but I remember coming back to Boston and having that poem just changed everything, and I just started competing like more and more regularly. Like come 2008, like I came back like a different woman. I was like, I've been broken, and I'm a phoenix, and I had to live with my ex-boyfriend in an apartment, and he had to listen to me read that poem constantly.
Yes.
Like a broken record. Yeah. So yeah, and I put out my first album around that time as well. So like, yeah, I started competing regularly, and in 2000, I think maybe it was that same year, 2008 to 2000. Yeah, 2008, I went to my first college national poetry slam. So I wasn't a high school poet, what we would call a youth poet in the States, but I went to college nationals and won Best Female Poet at that slam.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I know somebody those titles had never existed before, and my friend Sean at the time was like, we are making these titles, Best Male Poet, Best Female Poet. Joshua Bennett was named Best Male Poet. He's now like a Pulitzer Prize kind of person, and I won Best Female Poet, and I live in New Zealand, so that's it. Yeah.
But you live in New Zealand and you're touring with a poetry show. So.
Yes, hello.
So I guess like connected to this idea of like being young and doing poetry and like or like also not like potentially knowing where your poetry space is, and also this idea of like not being sure whether to call yourself a poet or not. What's like, it sounds really cheesy, but whatever. What's like a piece of advice you would give young poets? I would say especially young femme poets in New Zealand who are like looking for a space to like explore performance especially, but I mean also just like writing, finding a social space to be a poet with other poets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great. I think poetry has been through and performance poetry in particular has been through a real boom in New Zealand.
Yes, definitely.
It felt like coming back after being away for nearly 5 years felt really different.
Yeah.
And like there has been this massive boom, which is great because I think it means people are more aware of it existing. And so probably have a better chance of seeking out spaces, whether that's open mics or places like Jaffa and Motif and Pim. And that is basically always where I would tell people to start. Like go along, even if you're too scared to read, just go along and listen and, you know, talk to the poets that read things that really speak to you. Because often the best way to start, I think, is with specific relationships with other artists who are doing things that you admire. There's like nothing safer or more useful to me creatively than the fact that I would give Carrie a first draft of anything I wrote and know that she will hold it and, you know, treat it with care.
And love it.
Yeah. And hype me up one way or another while also helping me make it better. And so I think those relationships are so important and actually what I felt like I was missing really early on. And so that is what I would advise doing anything you can to try and cultivate.
Yeah.
That.
I think similarly on like a smaller scale, even like you can definitely go to open mics, go to slams, go to theater events, go to live art, but also find a person or two that you trust, right?
Yeah,
like
completely.
Not before, but like simultaneously when I started going to open mics, I also created like a poetry club at my college. And it was like genuinely like initially just 5 or 6 of us who would gather and read poems to one another and cultivating our own safe space, not necessarily an echo chamber. We could still critique and still give feedback to one another, but a safe space is really important, especially when you're starting, I think. And so, yeah, just even pulling a friend or two if you're in high school, like, and saying, hey, let's bounce this off one another. Hey, do you want to hear this? Like, I think that's really important to nourish that spark. Yeah,
because I think some people find that space in the classroom, or have like a group at high school that they can write with, but then they go to university and it's like
Daunting.
yeah,
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
sort of uprooted and need to find new spaces. But yeah, I guess I have a similar experience that like talking to people at Jaffa is what sort of gave me the confidence isn't really the right word. I guess maybe safety to keep being a poet in that space. Just like knowing that that I had the support that other people cared about me in that space. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people, the thing that makes people nervous, right, is the sharing out loud. And the sharing out loud is actually different than performance, right? There's kind of different levels to it. And sharing out loud is the first scariest step up to the cliff. And it sometimes feels like the performance is the leap off the cliff. It's when you reach another level. It's when you are not just vulnerably reading on a page, but embodying and inhaling that poem to then gift it back to someone else, right? And so yeah, there's different steps to what you are doing when you choose to share things out loud. And sometimes it's important to just lean into it. If you have that inkling and that instinct that you want to do it, then lean into it, then follow it.
You were saying how there's like a difference between reading your poem aloud and performance. And I'm going to take that even further to sort of come back round to hysterical. Because you were saying that like the early iterations of How We Survive were just poetry. The early iterations of How We Survive were really just poetry, reading the poetry, like performing the poetry. But it was a poetry show rather than like a theatre. Whereas I feel like from what you've told me, hysterical is like an even more theatrical iteration of performance for your poetry. What I know that you worked with Dan a little bit as well in developing that. What did you sort of learn about putting poetry into a theatre context? What sort of
I can't even tell you like a year. We've worked on the show for, I don't know, like 9 months before we started performing it. And so that was including like research about topics for what we were writing about rewriting about 1,000 times. Some certain poems have like 10 different drafts to them, and editing, and then cultivating that for the book, and then cultivating that for the show. But in between all of that as well, there were all these spaces in which we were working with different creatives and developing our own ideas about how to lean into the theatrical performance element. Where can we not be speaking between poems that allows poems to naturally transition into one another? Where can we be using lights or audio in order to enhance or change the vibe of what's happening? Something that I love about slam, but really when I say slam, I really mean this uninhibited performance, is being able to step up and not have to apologize for being absolutely fierce or absolutely hysterical or absolutely wild, in a poem, and getting to actually be that. And so, yeah, it's been really amazing to cultivate those moments, as well as getting to be ourselves on stage, connect with one another and connect with the audience. Yeah.
There's a lot going on the show. I think Dan was really helpful in terms of thinking about the different layers of the show, because there are poems and they're a key part of the scripting. There's us as people, and we talk directly to the audience. It's a show that very much breaks the fourth wall from the outset. And then there's the fact that you're in a theatre space, and so you get to use theatrical elements like having a set,
props,
like having props, things that you don't get to do in a poetry slam or a poetry reading in the same way. And so it's been really cool to think about each of those on an individual level, and how we can weave them together into something that feels like it makes sense in a theatre.
Because we had all these ideas and we spoke about them, and Dan was one of our creative consultants who just helped kind of tie a lot of those, weave some of those
together.
things, or say, hey, this makes sense and this makes sense together, and
totally.
So there were 2 people who listened to the whole show before we ever read it to anyone, and it was Dan and Ken Arkind.
Jesse's also.
Oh, yeah.
Jesse's basically had heard a lot of it.
She was another creative consultant. Yeah, that heard a lot of the show.
It was
I don't
really
think she ever
good.
sat through.
I don't think she sat through the whole thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
which is reasonable.
We're a lot.
We were a mess at that
We were a
particular
nightmare.
point of time.
It's a miracle at times that we're
I
even
know.
functioning.
I know.
And to have like had sold out shows and stuff, I'm just like, I didn't know that anyone was going to come. Like, all right,
No,
great.
and it was so weird. I think the whole thing that we love about spoken word is you get up on an open mic and you try something that you have just read and just written, and you get immediate feedback to it, and then you get to work on it.
There was
We'd been
none
in
of that.
lockdown for years. Neither of us had performed for over a year.
Yeah.
And there was just, I don't know, there was something about How We Survive where it was like we were each doing a couple of solo poems that they were just tried and tested.
They were tried and
I
tested.
just knew when I got to that moment in the show that I was like, I get to do a poem now that like I will never doubt. Like I know this poem is good, and I have seen it impact audiences, and I can hold that. And there was nothing of that in Hysterical
Yeah.
because not a single poem. That Jaffa event where we each read, there was a Jaffa event at Basement where we each read one new solo poem from the show the week before our first Hysterical show. That
our
is the
first time.
only time any of that was read to an audience before we got up in Tauranga and did the entire show.
Which was our favorite show of tour.
It was
to
so
be very
good.
clear. We loved
So
that
far,
show.
so far.
Yeah,
I mean, so far, true, yeah.
But also probably because we felt like it was a miracle that we got through it with no scripts.
Yeah. That we knew him. And I think we were also shocked. Sorry, we're just vibing right now.
No, I like it.
We have a poem in the show called Feminist Killjoys, which is hand on heart, my favorite poem
Yeah,
in the
you
show.
love that poem.
Because we get to be very angry during it, and I love that. People laughed during that poem, and I had no idea that anyone was going to laugh. And it is because
No,
it's
it
kind
makes
of
sense
ridiculous.
now.
It makes
Yeah.
sense to people laughing. But when we were doing it in Liv's living room,
Screaming at each other.
it, I thought this is the most badass poem ever. And then we got
Never
up on
would have
stage.
expected laughter.
Yeah, and I was like, oh my god, this is.
But
this
it's
is
been
funny.
But
What?
it's been so cool to see the way
Yeah.
those poems were interpreted by us when all we'd done was read them to each other millions of times. Versus, someone else gets to interpret this work now. And
Yeah.
that's actually super nice. It would be great if we could stop trying to figure out what these poems are and let anyone else tell us what they think they are.
Yeah, it's great, yeah.
Yeah. It was a wild experience for that reason.
I love that. I love that. Shout out Tauranga. I'm really happy they gave you a good.
They were so
Yeah,
great.
Good
we're
time.
going back.
We're coming back.
Tauranga has many difficulties at the moment, so I'm glad that you
Yeah.
were able to.
And thank you to you because you hooked us up with Hannah, and she's now called. She
yeah.
calls us her best friend now. So we're
yes.
tight. She sent her mom to the show in Nelson. So
Yeah, a dream.
Great.
I'm loving going to cities, and people are coming up and like, my daughter saw you in this city, and they're like, and
It's
they-
so cool.
this-
famous.
Yeah.
This
famous.
very cute
It's
old
the
man in
best.
Dunedin came up and it was like, and it turned
You
out to be
know
Mel
my daughter.
McCurcher's dad,
Yeah.
and I was like, what is happening?
Yeah,
It's
it's
so
really
cute.
nice.
That's so cute.
Poets supporting poets.
Big time. Big time. So, for the people who listen to this when it drops, can you tell us a little bit about when your Auckland shows are?
They are the 5th to the 9th of July at Basement Theatre at 8 p.m.
Yes, we're in the big theater space.
We're in the big space. We're downstairs at Basement. I think the other show that was supposed to be on at Basement the same week as us has had to postpone because of COVID. So I now think we're the only show at Basement that week,
Come see us.
which means there's no excuse to not just come see us.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those nights, you will be free.
Yeah.
The listener. I'm speaking to the listener.
Oh, yeah.
You will be free.
You will be free.
we won't be free. We'll be doing the show.
You
but
must be.
yes.
I just don't believe people have plans 5 nights in a row.
Surely not.
I do. I'm doing
Yeah,
the show.
we do.
But you will be at the show. That's,
Yes,
that's
exactly.
The plan.
That's the whole point.
Yeah. Come along. It's going to be a good time.
Shall we listen to a poem from?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Let's do a poem from the show.
okay. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, great. This is a poem we wrote completely by accident.
Yeah, true.
Wasn't supposed to be in the
True
show.
story.
Now it's one of our favorites. If you're not hysterical, you're not paying attention.
We are 2 years deep into this pandemic. I have sanitized my hands more times than I've hugged my friends.
I don't even have the energy to start a new Netflix show.
My phone battery only lasts 20 minutes.
No one is merging like a zip on the highway,
and I am barely holding it together.
If one more person tells me to just calm down or go for yet another walk, I will completely lose it.
You want me to send an email?
Crying. You want me to get dressed and attend an in-person meeting? Absolutely not.
You want me to hear the name Machine Gun Kelly one more time?
No. You want me to watch another billionaire joyride into space?
Never again. At this point, my anxiety has anxiety.
Every day I am exhausted, but I never go to bed any earlier because I am too busy worrying about my inability to keep a plant alive and how we will ever afford a house in Auckland.
The fact that we all put clothes on today feels like a miracle.
I don't ever want to hear the words hot girl summer again. I want old lady slug summer, where I just live in this body and everyone leaves me alone. I want to eat my avocado on toast in peace.
I want clothing with appropriately sized pockets.
I want the city of Auckland to be air conditioned.
I want to be a stay-at-home person without any children.
I want to be a baby.
I want my partner to spend half as much time thinking about cleaning our apartment as I do. I want to own a baby goat.
I want a new Adele album every week.
I want my 18-year-old knees back.
I want to star in a Broadway musical.
I want you to know that I am trying.
And I am failing.
And that is okay.